All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Carlos. We are Restoration Fellowship. You can find us on focusonthekingdom.org website, which is here. And if you want to know about us, you can go there, focusonthekingdom.org. You can see our beliefs, or what traditionally is called the Statement of Faith, under the Beliefs tab. And Sundays you can join us for, if you don't have a church you go to, or if you're in need of fellowship, we do sermons, Bible studies. Usually Anthony does Sundays at 10:30, and this is the link. And there's a chat box supposedly here. My thing is not working, but so you can attend online, and you can ask all kinds of interesting questions to Anthony. And all right, so we're back by popular demand with Q&A, which usually was Fridays, but we're doing this on a Wednesday. So again, if you have any questions, you can type them in the chat box. If you want to interact with Anthony later on, we'll go through some questions we received during the week first. But if you want to interact with him regarding any questions asked, any questions answered, you can do that by clicking on the little hand button at the bottom as we go through the questions. So, Anthony?
Yes, I'm right here. My head full of interesting questions that have been asked during the week, probably scores on various subjects. And this is the miracle of internet. Doesn't mean that one knows all the answers, but I do at least have 5,000 books right here at home, which help me. And of course, the internet provides a lot of good answers. So let's see what comes.
All right. In case you're just by chance watching this pre-recorded, we will post this later on our YouTube channel, which you can find right here at YouTube Abrahamic Movement channel, right there. So that's the link. Sorry, that's not the link. Here we go. There we go. So youtube.com/user Abrahamic Movement. And the last video we did, very popular, with Dr. Dale Tuggy, professor of philosophy at Fredonia up in New York, on his little booklet there, What is the Trinity? And you can also see our Bible studies that Anthony usually does. We're going through the book of Hosea at the moment. All right, Anthony, we'll go to the first question here.
Okay.
If all the physical Sabbaths and feast days are abolished, then why in the last chapters of Ezekiel we see them being kept in the millennial temple?
Yeah, that's a very usual question. People have asked that over the years. First of all, the Sabbaths, holy days, and new moons are not for us today. That's Colossians 2:16-17. The plain, ordinary meaning of that passage is that nobody is to take you to task in terms of foods and drinks, or separate category in terms of Sabbath, holy days, new moons. That's the calendar, 3 parts of it, which are a single shadow. They're a single shadow, and they're not necessary now because Jesus is the substance of that shadow. The substance, the real thing, replaces the shadow. So you don't want to go back in the shadows. No need for that. You get that same shadow image in Hebrews also. Same idea. The new covenant is most important. It's possible to try to obey God and disobey him. That's to say, you can try to obey God and Jesus and get the wrong covenant, and that turns out to be disobedience. It's actually disobedience to obey God in things that he says are not necessary, like physical circumcision, clearly is not mandated for us in the New Testament. So it'd be wrong then to take Genesis 17, I'm just quoting an example, and apply it to the New Covenant. The art then is to decide what is the law of Moses, what are the works of the law, that technical phrase, as distinct from the law of Messiah, most important, the Torah of Messiah, the Spirit. 2 Corinthians 3 is a very important text. Moses is over. Moses in the letter is finished. All right, back to the question. It doesn't mean that in the millennium God cannot do something different, and it appears that he will. There's a temple in Ezekiel, and there are people offering sacrifices. Certainly the Feast of Tabernacles is to be kept at the end of Zechariah. Clearly, if Egypt doesn't come up and keep that one feast at least, maybe all of them, I don't know, at least the one, then they'll get no rain. They'll get the point. So it's a different, to use that awful word dispensation, it's a different arrangement. When Jesus is back on earth, the devil will have been bound so he can deceive the nations no longer. The saints of all the ages will be ruling the world with Messiah. Gradually, the world will learn to make sense of life instead of the chaos we now have. And God, in his wisdom, can make the Israelites even go through that same disciplinary action if he wants to. They never did it right, so let them get that right first, and then they can move later into the position that we're enjoying now, where we're not bound by animal sacrifices. I don't know what else to say about that. Let me hear what you have to say. What do you think?
Myself
or anybody? Yeah.
Yeah, if anyone wants to chip in, well, we got through the questions and people, but if you want to interact now or anyone has anything to say. So basically, just to clear up, in the 1,000 years, which most of us in the Christian world, regardless of denomination, we agree that Jesus is coming back to establish a millennial or 1,000 literal year period of peace, and back to the days of Noah-like days where people lived a very long time. Yes. 65. So during that time, for some reason that we cannot honestly explain, God will have the Jewish people go through the whole Torah thing again. Is that correct? The bottom line.
Yeah, that seems to be right. It's quite clear, as you said, that there will be longevity. There will be mortals surviving into that millennial kingdom, which is the first 1,000 years, the first stage of the kingdom of God in its truly messianic form on the earth. And if we want to argue from that we should now be keeping the Sabbath from Friday sunset and the holy days, and then the new moons logically ought to do the new moons. Major point in Colossians 2:16 and 17, all three, that's to say the weekly, monthly, and annual observances, which are mentioned as such about 10 times in the Old Testament, they go together. If you're going to insist on one, you have to insist on all three. Better to insist on none of them, because the whole single shadow has been replaced by Messiah. Don't go back under the shadow when you've got the light and the faith and the light and energy of Jesus now, the risen Jesus. He is your Sabbath. He's the one who gives you rest, and he's the one who will give you ultimate rest in the future kingdom. He is our Passover, and we should be keeping the feast. That doesn't mean keeping the feast once a year. The verb in the Greek there is a continuous present. We should be feasting, keeping the feast daily. That's what's happened to those calendrical decisions from the Old Testament. And if you want to argue then for keeping the Sabbath, now you're going to have to argue for keeping also sacrifices, because you'll find them being offered in the millennium also. I don't have the verse on the tip of my tongue, but there's a place where people will be offering sacrifices in a temple. You can't do that now. There's no temple. And in Colossia, you couldn't possibly offer a physical sacrifice. So Paul is not talking about, he's not warning people against the pressure to keep physical sacrifices. You couldn't do that in Colossia anyway. It's silly. No, the plain, easy sense is the right one there. Unfortunately, some of the Jewish roots people who are determined to obey God in Old Testament terms sometimes, they have about 5 or 6 disagreeing attempts to get rid of Colossians 2:16 and 17. I recommend the little book we did on the law and the Sabbath, the New Testament Christianity. I think it's free at our site if I remember, but have a look at that and you'll see how this sort of argument can be laid out.
Yep, it is free, and again, you can go to Focus on the Kingdom. Go to, is it under Books? In the books tab, you go down,
Yeah.
and then there's. Did you mention you were a Sabbatarian for quite a while?
Oh yes, I didn't mention that, but I'm glad you mentioned it there.
That's why
In
you
my
wrote.
ignorance and naivety in the Church of England, where we didn't know anything much about the Bible, Herbert Armstrong of the Worldwide Church of God came along and said, "Look, you've got to keep the Ten Commandments." And I said, "That sounds reasonable. Well, what does the fourth one say?" It says, "Keep the Sabbath on Friday sunset to Saturday sunset." So I did. Now I'm a little bit more sophisticated in the best sense. I hope not snobbish, but better educated. And I can see that you're not under the Ten Commandments in the letter. And I recommend for all your friends around the coffee table, 2 Corinthians chapter 3. The Moses affair, the law written in stones, is over, finished. The glory of Moses, great and amazing as it was, has been superseded by the glory of Messiah. This is liberating for me. I feel so much better. You see, the truth that we're trying to propagate by the miracle of internet here are to make you not only just wiser, certainly not more intelligent in a snobbish sense, heaven forbid. They're supposed to make you feel better, and ultimately, of course, to get you into the kingdom, because the words of Jesus are spirit. They're spirit energizing words, John 6:63. So the more truth you can feed into your brain, rather than the poison of error, the better you're going to do. You're going to feel better. All your relationships will be improved. So that's my thought. Let's see what you have to say.
So you say you will feel better. I'll just ask you about this because I'm a former agnostic for those who don't know us as a whole. So I didn't go through any sort of religious system. But let me ask you, Anthony, you say you feel better now. Are you saying that while you were a Sabbatarian and you were convinced that you were, being obedient by keeping certain things related to Torah, you were not feeling good at that time?
No, I was not. I was not thriving at all well. And parallel to that, I've met former Jehovah's Witnesses who will attest to the fact that their health was suffering under the pressure of the watchtower. Too much pressure, being told exactly what to do, being dragooned and forced into beliefs because the watchtower is said to be the only true organization. That's just not true. And so, yes, one's health improves. The truth is life-giving. It's health-giving. That's 1 Timothy 6, verse 3. And people have counseled me to slow down when I mention these verses. 1 Timothy 6, verse 3. If anybody comes to you, Paul says, and doesn't bring the health-giving, life-imparting words of Jesus, he's an arrogant idiot. I'm paraphrasing Paul there. Paul really piles on the adjectives to say how bad that is. Well, to say that you must keep the Sabbath on Friday sunset to Saturday sunset is simply false in the New Covenant. Colossians 2:16 and 17 is against it. Galatians 4, verse 10, Paul is horrified that his Gentile converts there are being drawn into the Jewish calendar. You see, that re-erects the barrier between the Jew and the Gentile. The one thing that it was Paul's glory to break down. He wants one group, one faith for Jew and Gentile. The moment you insist on Sabbath keeping for Jews, maybe not for Christians, but certainly for Jews, the moment you do the new moons, the moment you insist on physical circumcision, then I think you've moved outside the enormous freedom that Paul recommends. So it's back to Paul, back to Galatians. Meditate in Galatians. One text in Galatians 5 and 3 that is really astonishing. If you want to get circumcised physically, Paul says in chapter 5, is it, or is it 6? 5:3 probably. If you want to get circumcised, there it is, or 5:3, how about that one? Let me repeat, look at this. Carlos, by the way, needs some congratulations for the way he flashes these things up on the screen at a moment's notice. How do you do? I don't know. Anyway, it's very clever. Look at verse 3. Let me repeat this, Paul says. Every person who gets circumcised, he is automatically obligated to keep the whole law. Say to your friends, what is this whole law which you mustn't keep? It's not only circumcision. What is this whole law which it is wrong to keep? That whole law which it is disobedience to God to keep. See, that's very powerful. Paul is straining every nerve, using every form of sarcasm, a little vulgarity even. I wish they'd just chop it off, he says finally. He's exasperated by the Jewish element there because they're destroying the freedom that we have in Christ. He does the analogy with the two women. One's a bondwoman, one is free. For goodness sake, he says, be like Sarah. Don't pursue this false religion, which is trying to be Jewish roots, trying to do the sign of the old covenant. You're in the wrong covenant. Jesus is the head of the new covenant. Move into that. That's my thought. I think many would agree with all of that, by the way. It's not terribly rare to say that kind of thing.
Just a comment from one of our audience. Matthew, in the millennium, could it be that it's necessary for the mortals to offer sacrifices, keep the feasts, as the veil or protection is removed?
It's quite possible. It could be. I don't know the answer. It could. Yes, it's a good suggestion. God is going to do that, and he will explain and through Jesus why. But why not then reenact the disciplinary form of the law? That was a schoolmaster, Paul says. He can make them go through that. They never did it right last time. So why not have another shot at that? But these are mortals. The immortals are not in any way touched or interested in keeping feasts. You're not going to be offering sacrifices as an immortal. Jesus is not keeping the feast now as an immortal. So it's the mortal population, which, as you suggest, may be a temporary discipline. It might even go on for a few years and not go on for 1,000 years. I don't know that. All I know from Zechariah 14, you can read it, is that all the nations apparently are going to be bidden to keep this marvelous annual festival, the Feast of Tabernacles. And if they refuse to do it, God is going to show them immediately. One of our issues today is that God has remained silent. You find that twice in Isaiah. I've remained silent for a long time. God doesn't intervene necessarily. He can, but he doesn't always discipline us flat out straight after we make a mistake. We've got to work at that ourselves with the help of our friends correcting us too. But yes, there are many good reasons why this may be. I don't know. All I know is Zechariah 14, keep the feast, then that's mortals in the kingdom. Egypt must be keeping the feast. Why not?
All right, we'll go to the next question. I would think that Jesus was dead while he was in the tomb in 1 Peter 3, body, soul, and spirit. There's a typo. What are your thoughts on this? So this is when Jesus is said to be made alive in the spirit. He goes down and preaches to angels, I guess.
Well, fallen angels. Yeah, that's a great question. Not difficult. The best commentaries get this right. You got it absolutely straight. When you're dead, you don't do any preaching. Let's start there. Ecclesiastes 5, or is it 9, 5, and 10? Ecclesiastes 9, 5, and 10. Use this with your friends all the time. The dead know nothing at all. There's no activity in Sheol. That's the Hebrew word for gravedom. The whole world of the dead seen as a huge grave. In gravedom, there's nothing going on, period. No activity. Nobody knows anything there. If you don't understand that, your children of 3 or 4 do, you need to get that over clearly. That, as Kyle and Delich say so nicely in their magnificent commentary on the Old Testament, Kyle and Delich, they say this statement in Ecclesiastes 9, 5, and 10 is typical of the whole of the Old Testament. Absolutely. That's what the dead do in the Old Testament. They wait until resurrection in Daniel 12, verse 2. This is very elementary. So when you're dead, you're dead. You're not preaching. So it says in Peter then that Jesus died, and then he was made alive en pneumati, that's the Greek, en pneumati. I'm using the modern Greek pronunciation. That's what we do at Atlanta Bible College, and I'm pleased to say they do it at Harvard too, I gather. There it is. He's got it up for us. So he died, and then, which is the verse we're looking at?
Verse 18, because Messiah also suffered for sin.
Thank you.
Once for all, the upright for the wicked, that he might bring you to God. Messiah was put to death as a mortal human being, but made alive by resurrection in the spirit.
Yes.
This resurrected condition, he also went and made a proclamation to the fallen spirits in prison.
Yes.
So I think you're paraphrasing. A lot of some
Yeah.
translations don't have the resurrected.
No, but being made alive is to be resurrected. You get that in Revelation 20. He was dead and he came alive. That's absolutely plain and obvious. And it was on the Sunday after the Friday that happened. Then he went off and announced his proclamation. That's obscure, but that's what he did, to spirits who were disobedient. These are not human beings. Human beings are not spirits. These are fallen angels, undoubtedly. And there's a reference somewhere else in Jude, is it, to Tartarus? Is it either 2 Peter or I've forgotten which is the Tartarus passage? But Tartarus is the place of restraint for fallen angels. That's where Jesus went and announced his victory, that being the most extraordinary event in history up to that point. And those spirits, Peter then carefully goes on to say, were disobedient in the days of Noah. This episode with spirits was a result of fallen angels marrying human females in Genesis 6. That caused a terrible disruption and largely led to the flood. So this is an awful event. Peter then refers to it. Those angels who acted in an extreme fornication manner, as Peter says, or is it Jude? One of the two.
That's Jude.
Extreme fornication, right? That's what they did. They committed fornication. And so they're now in eternal chains, aeonian chains, permanent chains in that case, permanent chains, waiting for a subsequent judgment. And that's what's going on. All of this is in the excellent commentary by Selwyn, Selwyn, probably quite inexpensive secondhand. Buy your books secondhand from ABE Books or bookfinder.com. No need to buy books new these days. Edward Selwyn covers all this, and many good commentators. See, one of our problems, let me say this, is that the public is not gaining the access to good books. Now, I'm not saying that these learned people with their PhDs are necessarily good believers, but sometimes they analyze the language facts extremely well. They're good at that. And so commentary is to be consulted. Some of the great commentators, international critical commentary, Edward Selwyn on 1 Peter, I've forgotten the series, does all of this well. I'm not telling you anything couldn't be found in any decent commentary.
Right, and so back to the question, body, soul, and spirit, there's a good comment in the ESV Study Bible.
Good. Mm-hmm.
Spirit, soul, and body represent the entirety of a person, that is the whole person. It seems unlikely that this is a tripartite, that is three-part, of the human nature, body, soul, and spirit, where spirit and soul would refer to different parts. More likely, Paul is simply using several terms for emphasis, and this is in relation to 1 Thessalonians 5:23, where he talks about body, soul, and spirit, for similar ways of expressing the totality of a person. See the verses there.
That's excellent. Yes, don't become a sort of super psychologist and try to analyze all that. Relax. That's just a person. A soul is a person in the Bible. Animals are souls also. The animals have spirit and life. They have the breath of life in them. Human beings do, and that departs at death. It goes back to where it came from. But the person himself dies. That's Stephen, who commits himself, his spirit, into the hands of God, then he falls asleep. Now, committing your spirit into God's hands can also be done when you're alive. There's a psalm, I think it might be 31, I'm not sure, where David commits himself, his spirit, into God's hands. That's, oh God, accept me. I'm committing myself into your hands. He wasn't dying there. So don't get all fussed about separation of body and soul. The great point is that the dead are not living now. They're not watching you. It's really quite pointless to be lighting candles to dead people. Don't bother with that.
One of our chatters is asking this imprisoned disobedient angels. Are these angels the ones, the saints, Christians will judge according to 1 Corinthians 6:3?
Probably not, because these are fallen angels. I don't think they will be around. It's possible. I don't know that. It's possible. And who knows exactly what's meant by supervising angels there. That could be supervising good angels, angels who will be at our disposition, perhaps. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know that anybody does. It could involve, some say in the judgment of fallen angels too. That would be after the millennium, I would think. That particular text in 1 Corinthians 6:2, don't you know the saints are going to manage the world? The word is manage there, krino, in its Hebraic sense, manage the world and manage angels, assess angels, whatever is meant exactly by that, I don't know. We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, because I believe the language of the Peter and Jude is that these ones that are under the earth right now have been judged. That's why they're down there. They have been in a way, and they're just waiting extermination.
Yes, that may well be. Yeah, they've been tartarized.
Right.
The verb there.
Means of gloom and doom or something.
Yes, whatever it is exactly. I know they were scared to go there. You know, Jesus encountered some demons who said, have you come to torment us before the time? That could be a different set of demons. There are still demons in the sublunar space, the prince of the power of the air, Satan's hordes. You have them, and you also have another set of demons in Tartarise as well, probably.
All right, we're going to the last question, and if you want to interact with us, you can raise your little electronic hand button. And let's see, I'm trying to bring it up. It's in relation to the Son of Man in Luke, I think. Okay, so the question is, what does Jesus mean in Luke, in Matthew 26, 64, Luke 22, 69? From now on, the Son of Man will be seated at the right hand of the mighty God. And let me just bring up the Luke passage. So this is the trial scene. If you really are the Messiah, says the high priest, tell us. Even if I were to tell you, you will not believe me.
Yes.
If I were to ask you a question, you will not answer. But from now on, the Son of Man will be seated at the right hand of the power of God. So what did Jesus mean by from now on?
Well, obviously he hasn't died yet. So he's not at the right hand, but from now on is a general reference to the future. You work that problem, it's not a problem, you work that out from the subsequent narrative. He's about to die. He died from the time that he was obviously crucified, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, probably on that Friday, the 15th of Nisan, the year, I'm not sure, doesn't matter. He rose on Sunday. And then he was taken to the right hand either immediately or 40 days later, it doesn't particularly matter. He arrives then where he is now. That is Psalm 110, verse 1. He's now seated at the position of secondary power next to God himself at the right hand. That's Psalm 110:1. If your friends don't know about Psalm 110:1, you need to teach them. This psalm is cited more often by far more often than any other Bible verse from the Hebrew Bible in the New. It's massive. It's a John 3:16. It's a refrigerator verse because it describes Yahweh, the one God, Jehovah. It doesn't matter how you pronounce it. And incidentally, the New Testament makes no issue at all about pronouncing it in Hebrew, none. And they could, I just throw that in. The Greek New Testament is the canon of Scripture for us. It makes no issue. It could be writing Yahweh, Jehovah in Greek letters. Some of the Greek manuscripts of the Old Testament do that. However, the apostles, for whatever good reason, known well to them, they're quite happy to call God Lord, and more important, they're very, very keen to call God Father. When Jesus said, this is how you're to pray, and answered the good question, teach us to pray. He says, our Father. That's the intimate New Testament title that is not so frequent in the Old. So that's the key address to God, our Father. You want to say Yahweh and refer to Jehovah, Old Testament, 7,800, 8,000 times, whatever it is, that's fine. The pronunciation is not entirely known. Based on Exodus, I will be what I will be, and I will be has sent you. You call him I will be if you want to. I don't recommend that, but he will be is probably the meaning. Now, the meaning of that is explained in Revelation 1. He's the one who was and is to come. The meaning of that name, not the Hebrew name itself, which is completely not a concern of the New Testament canon, is given. Anyway, where were we? Coming back then to the Son of Man. In Psalm 110, he's the human being, the ultimate human being, Son of Man.
The question was, why does Jesus say from now on?
Well, because it is from now on. I mean, he didn't say within 3 weeks, 10 days, 5 days, 6 months. Follow the story. We know when his ascension is, or we know within a month at least, however you read the text. I have not yet ascended to my Father. I'm going to my Father, perhaps that very day, perhaps at Pentecost. I'm not sure. It doesn't matter. You can struggle with that a little bit. But he's there now. And that is the key verse. 1 Timothy 2:5 should settle all arguments. There's one God and one man Messiah. That's Psalm 101, the Hebrew word Adoni. Tell your friends, that's the word for non-deity. You could have a ministry just dedicated to that one psalm. We have got friends out there working at blogs, interfering in the best sense, intervening in blogs, making comments, to point out that that second Lord is not capital L-O-R-D. If it were, that would be Adonai. That would be God speaking to God. That's a disaster. The universe falls. It's God speaking to not God. Yahweh speaking to Adoni, A-D-O-N-I, which in all of its 195 occurrences never, ever means God. Ask any Jewish friend. The public has been so overwhelmed with the misinformation here that my heart goes out to them. But what are we going to do to try to help them? So that's easy. From now on, that's to say from the point at which the rest of the text say he arrived there at the right hand. He's the Son of Man, the Adoni of Psalm 110:1, seated at the right hand, waiting in Hebrews. It says, waiting until his enemies are made his footstool. That will happen in the second coming. That's Psalm 2. Why are the nations raging? Why don't they shut up, sit down, and listen to the Messiah, God says. He laughs at them. He said, you silly people, stop it. Put your arms down. There'll be a tremendous uprising, uproar against the returning Messiah. They haven't got a clue. They're so deceived. Jesus will get them all under control. With your help and God's help, you are going to rule and reign with Messiah. That's Revelation 2:26-27. This is a whole story. The whole story of the Bible goes like that. So I don't know what else to say. The commentaries basically get that right too, by the way. You can always go online, and there are pulpit commentaries that Jameson, Paulson, Brown, Benson, and a host of others. Everybody has access to that. So you can do some homework there and then come up with these excellent questions as well.
Yeah, also it's interesting that in Mark, it's even more pronounced because he says, you will see the Son of Man. They obviously did not. So
well, no, they didn't see him literally. They saw, if they had understanding, some of those were still alive. But that you doesn't matter. The you is solidarity you, corporate you. Let me remind you that Jesus said to the Pharisees in Matthew 23, the end of Matthew 23, Jesus said to a group of hostile Pharisees standing in front of him, he said, you killed Abel. This is most important. Matthew 23, at the end there, there it is. Again, Carlos has this amazing technology in front of it. There it is, verse 35. Upon you will come all the righteous blood that's been shed. From the blood of Abel in Genesis to the blood of Zechariah, which is in 2 Chronicles, the last book of Jesus' Bible. You have the same books exactly as Jesus, but they're in a different order. So that's like saying from Genesis to Revelation, from Genesis to Malachi. You murdered them. They didn't, but they did. You, corporately, you, part of that murderous group, that evil generation. That word generation doesn't mean 40 years always at all. You murderous group, you killed them all. And then you're not going to see me again till I come back and you say, well, they've been long dead. They're unlikely to be in the first resurrection. But to you is corporate death. That's very easy for the Bible and very difficult for Westerners. Didn't Jesus say in Matthew 24 to the disciples, you will see all this happen? When you see the abomination of desolation, this is another great subject. Jesus himself did not know the long periods of time. He said that in Acts 1:7, not for you to know. He certainly never said 40 years and it was all going to happen. That would turn us all into so-called pressurists. That's hopelessly bad. No, he said, I, the Son of God, don't even know. He knew from Daniel the signs of the coming parousia, second coming in the future. He knew that, but he didn't know the space of time that would elapse until all those signs began. Jesus then was ignorant of certain things. Always remember that when you do your study on Matthew 24, Mark 13, and Luke 21.
Yeah, it's also important to note that at the trial scene, regarding the question, what did Jesus mean from now on, the Son of Man? Also, it's important to remember that in the back of everyone's thoughts is Daniel 7.
Absolutely.
It's important because it's a sort of prophecy that's very vivid in everyone's minds. So this is very vivid. So when Jesus says to the high priest, you know, he's basically saying, I am that prophetic figure, that glorified human being.
Yes.
Some scholars say that that's why the high priest calls it blasphemy, because he's so outraged.
Yeah.
He sort of loses his mind and tears the ropes, which according to Torah he's not supposed to do.
Yes.
So he sort of goes out of his mind because can you imagine this criminal as he sees him?
Yep.
This guy who they're spitting on because he's the lowest of the low. And then this person is saying, guess what? I am your judge and executioner.
Yes.
So that is very...
If you're the Messiah, you have a right to say you're the Messiah. He never, ever, ever said, I'm God, I'm Yahweh.
Well, to them, he didn't look like a Messiah. He looked like a criminal that they're spitting on, like something at the bottom of your shoe, as we say nowadays. So it's outrageous to them.
Yes.
All right, and I think we covered those 3 questions.
Let's do Daniel 7, since you had it up there. That is a tremendous verse. In 7:13 and 14, you've got Jesus going up to get the kingdom, the authority to rule. That's the ascension, where he's the exalted prototype, super elevated human being. And then in 18 of that marvelous chapter, you have that, Daniel 7, you've got this, the holy ones, the saints, the holy ones of the Most High, that's God, will receive the kingdom and possess the kingdom for all ages to come. That's beautiful. Fear not, little flock, Jesus said. Fear not, don't be scared. It's your Father's delight and pleasure to give you the kingdom. There it is, right there. Then in verse 22, if you have that one, a couple more verses, verse 22, you got it possibly? The Ancient of Days came, the Father, judgment was passed in favor of the word there is blotted out on my screen, favor of the saints of the highest one.
The highest one, and the time arrived when the saints took possession of the kingdom. Has this happened is a good question to ask.
Obviously, it's not happened. If you think you're ruling with Christ now, you're not. That's a heresy, according to 1 Corinthians chapter 6, or is it 4? One of those two, doesn't matter. In early chapters of 1 Corinthians, Paul says, do not imagine you're reigning as kings. Now, you're not. The Son of Man himself had no place to put his head, not even a pillow. That's not a king ruling in Jerusalem. No, we're undergoing trial and testing now, suffering in the present evil age. That's Acts 14:22, through much tribulation. That's not the great tribulation, but tribulation in general. We are destined to enter the kingdom. That's quite clear. So in 22, then the saints get the kingdom. And in 27, if you have that one, of chapter 7 of Daniel, a key verse, so 18, 22, and 27, it says that all nations, languages, tongues on the earth will have to obey the saints.
There it is.
There it is.
The kingship and dominion and majesty of all the kingdoms under the heaven shall be given to the people of the holy ones of the Most High, whose kingship shall be an everlasting kingship, whom all dominions shall serve and obey. Yes,
it's a little bit indirect, but it's the saints, the people who are being served and obeyed there. Yes, justice is going to be done. Those Christians, some of whom are martyred for their faith, the tables are going to be turned. vengeance will be done, and all nations are going to have to serve Messiah and his chosen elect, international church of God, the Israel of God, Galatians 6:16, the true circumcision, the real people of God. And of course, in that kingdom, there will be restored ethnic Israel. Israel is now blinded, as Romans 9 says. God is stretching out his hand to them constantly, but they're a disobedient lot. Time is coming when a remnant will be saved, all Israel will be saved, in that context, talking about ethnic Israel. For the moment, then, 1 Peter clearly applies the prince, kingship, royal family text from Exodus 19:6, applies them to the international church. You are the true circumcision, Philippians 3:3. Unfortunately, some systems went overboard. They discovered the restoration in the future of a remnant of what I would call ethnic Jews or Israel. And they said, oh, that's it. You must never say that the church is Israel in any way. That was unfortunate. That was an overbalance in the wrong direction. Both things are true. We are certainly the Israel of God now in Galatians 6:16. We are certainly the kings and priests of Exodus 19:6, cited of us by Peter flat out in 1 Peter 2. Don't throw away your identity to an unconverted Jew. Yes, there's a future for Israel, the nation, but for the moment, stand firm on your identity. Otherwise, you're suffering from spiritual amnesia. You don't know who you are, and that's not a good place to be.
And here's one of the Pauline warnings in 1 Corinthians 4.
Good, thank you.
Brothers and sisters, I have applied this to Apollos and myself as an example to help you. In this way, you will learn not to go beyond what has been written and not arrogantly prefer one over the other.
Yeah.
Who made you so superior? What do you have that you were not given? Since you were given it, why do you proudly claim you were not? You think you have all you need. You think you are so wealthy. You think you are functioning as kings already. You do not need us. How I wish you were really ruling as kings so we could be ruling in the future kingdom of God with you.
Good translation. Oh, that's
yours.
I obviously approve of my own translation. That's, I think, utterly clear. Favorite topic of mine. I love that statement. What do you have that you were not given? I've said to the students at the college over the years, what talent have you got that God didn't give you? That's humbling. Our task is to use the talents we've got, to develop them and work at them in the service of God. But the talents come from our DNA, from God ultimately. But that's a terrific text. Don't imagine you're ruling the world now. Our millennialism is a kind of a nightmare. To equate the church with the kingdom is fundamentally wrong. It's a muddle good and evil to mix Satan and God together. Very, very wrong. No, you are not ruling the world on earth yet. It's coming. Certainly we have to have kingdom lifestyle now and all of that. I see that. Anything you want to say about the presence of the kingdom in the spirit is fine and wonderful. But be absolutely sure you are not ruling the world with Jesus now. Paul said it. Don't imagine you are. Would to God that we were ruling in the future kingdom. You hear Paul there? I just wish we were, but it isn't happening yet. It will as from the future. Parousia. We need to get that Greek word out there for the public. The second coming. It occurs about 24 times in the New Testament, not always with reference to Jesus. But let me tell you that when the word parousia, not presence, presence gives too much scope for muddle and confusion. Not presence, arrival, coming, second coming, if you like. Parousia. When it's used of Jesus, it always means the future single arrival of Jesus to set up his kingdom on the earth. It's going to happen after the Great Tribulation. Matthew 24:29 is a key verse. Immediately after, it doesn't say soon, doesn't say roughly after, immediately, without interval, immediately following the Great Tribulation, which hasn't happened yet, obviously, the sun will be darkened. There are cosmic signs to introduce this stupendous event. And then they will see, I'm saying to my former Jehovah's Witness friends here, and all current Jehovah's Witnesses, they will see the Son of Man coming, see, and with an angel or angels. He'll send out them as emissaries to gather his elect who will be scattered across the earth. And that's when the kingdom will be established in Jerusalem. Luke 1:33, the Lord God will give him the throne of his father David, and he'll reign forever on the throne of David. He's not there now. You can go. Take a plane to Israel. He's not there. Therefore, our millennialism is one of the most disastrous dislocations of God's plan that it would be possible to imagine.
Yeah, that's a very powerful passage by Paul, and also in Hebrews 6, he has a similar saying in a warning, a stark warning, that is, if you believe Paul wrote Hebrews, utterly impossible for those who once understood and experienced God's heavenly gift, who participated in the Holy Spirit, who have known God's good gospel word, that's about the kingdom, and the power of the kingdom age, or the age to come. So in part, it sounds like they experienced it, but obviously it's not here. And I often hear from people who practice, I should say, they practice a form of preterism or historicism, that they're preaching, you have the powers of the age now, because the kingdom is spreading now. But this is so anti the scriptures, which is read in 1 Corinthians 4 and now in Hebrews 6.
Yes, but Carlos, in this text in Hebrews, there is something of the power of the kingdom age to come to be had now.
Right, but the kingdom is always in the future, right? It's always coming. It's not, you know, the Hebrews writer is not saying, oh, it's here and that's why you have the powers of the age to come. There's an obvious always looking forward in the letters.
Of course. No text says that we've inherited the kingdom. That's a good distinction. Right. No text says you've entered the kingdom. However, you can experience the powers of that future age in the present. That's through the Spirit. So we mustn't diminish that part of it. This isn't very hard, but we're not ruling the world with Christ as per Revelation 2:26 and 27. That's quite clear.
Right, and also remember that the gift of Holy Spirit, the powers of the age to come, include the charismatic gifts, which obviously we are severely lacking for some reason. We're not raising the dead, we're not healing our brothers and sisters who are in wheelchairs, etc., etc. Right. So obviously there's a sort of dormancy, if that's a word, a dormancy to it. But there's a comment here, ironically, part of the quote of 1 Corinthians 4 about not going beyond what is written.
Yes.
The Matthew in the chat says, ironically, this is a favorite JW saying, do not go beyond what is written.
Oh, really? Yes.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, well, the Jehovah's Witnesses are very bright people often. Let's give them credit for the fact that they didn't like the system. They said, we're going to do our Bible more intensively, and they certainly have done that. I do suggest that they lacked good training. They didn't have the scholarship and the good sense to understand that much of what goes on in commentaries is right. They were told not to read any commentaries ever. That's a mistake. And they then came up with a disastrous mistake. And that was that 1914, Christ came back invisibly. It doesn't get any worse than that. That was a poison in the system. The coming of Christ, when it ever is going to be, and we're not setting any dates, that's been done fatally over and over again. When it does happen, it will be visible like lightning from east to west, parousia, arrival in splendor and glory, also called epiphania, which is a revelation, something visible. In fact, Paul is going to destroy the Antichrist with the outshining of his parousia, the epiphania of his parousia, combining the two words. That's a staggeringly important text in 2 Thessalonians 2, verse 4.
You mean
that the Antichrist has to be living in the years just before the second coming. The Antichrist cannot be Nero, cannot be Titus, it cannot be John Geshala, this Jew, because Jesus is going to destroy him at his parousia. Think about that. If you've been taught that the Antichrist is Titus, you've been misled because of 2 Thessalonians 2 verse 4, that Jesus is going to destroy the Antichrist, the man of sins who stands in the temple, standing where he shouldn't, where he, a masculine pronoun there, a masculine participle in the Greek, estikota, masculine, standing where he ought not to, that's Mark 13:14. Then when you see that, you're to flee or do whatever God will direct in other parts of the world. For then there will be a great tribulation, future. It's the great tribulation because it's the unique tribulation. It occurs again in Revelation 7 verse 14, and it occurs in Daniel 12 verse 1. Why don't people listen to what Jesus said? I'm talking about the Daniel abomination, Jesus said. Let the reader pay attention. Right there. Don't miss this. So what do people do? They miss it. They make up their own idea of the abomination of desolation. They turn it into a sequence of popes. No, man of sin is a single individual standing where Jesus is going to destroy him at his parousia. That's very clear. So I recommend that 2 Thessalonians 2 verse 4 as a corrective to some of the mistaken systems that we've taken on board without enough study, really. Yeah.
Right, now we'll go to your Facebook. There's a question about how does Revelation 21 fulfill AD 70, and this is the section. Then I saw new heaven, new earth. First heaven, first earth disappeared. The sea no longer existed. I saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, descending from God out of heaven, prepared as a bride, made beautiful for her husband. I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, now God's residence is with human beings, and he will live with them. They will be his people. God himself will be with them as their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes. Death will no longer exist. No more mourning, crying, pain ever again. The former conditions or things have passed away. So how was this? How did this come about in AD 70?
Well, it obviously did. I don't know of many who would venture that. That is self-evidently not true of AD 70. In fact, AD 70 was a disaster. Let me just go back and talk about Daniel 9 before we get to this point. Daniel 9, 24 to 27. Daniel is desperately praying for restoration. I repeat, for restoration, not for destruction. How long, he says, before the city and the sanctuary are going to be restored? They'd been bashed to pieces, by the Babylonian king and so on. And his prayer is when? How long before all of this is put back right? And so obviously the answer to that prayer in the so-called 70 weeks, 70 heptads it should be, 77s, the answer to that prayer gives him the resolution of the prayer, not a disastrous, cynical thing, namely AD 70, when thousands, maybe 70,000 at least, the numbers might be exaggerated in some cases, but thousands of Jews were banished or killed. That's not the end of the 70 weeks. It couldn't possibly be. So let's do that very quickly then. Jesus came on the scene, and that was the first 69 weeks of the prophecy. Messiah appears. He is cut off, killed, and then comes an evil guy. One needs to do the Hebrew very carefully here. Kyle and Delich will help you. He, a wicked prince, comes, who corrupts at least, if not destroys, the city and the sanctuary, and his end, the end of that evil prince, that's what the Hebrew says, will come with a flood of judgment. Thank you, got it right there. He comes to his end in 26b. What do we got? He shall destroy the city and sanctuary with the prince that's coming. They shall be cut off with a flood. No, that's not quite right. It's not that's the LXX. I don't do the LXX there. I would do the Hebrew if you got it for us. His end, that's much better. NET Bible gets it right. This wicked guy, the people of the coming prince, there he is, the evil one, will destroy them. And his end, he'll come to his death in that episode. Nero did not. Titus did not. Doesn't fit. But anyway, as I just said, the resolution of the prayer that Daniel pours out his heart in, remarkable prayer, is that everything's going to be okay. Not everything's going to be ruined. 70 AD is simply not the end of anything except the end of the disaster of Jerusalem. Until the end of the time period, war's been decreed and so on. And then this evil person, he's a king of the north, and that won't work for Rome either. The whole notion was it got to be the Pope. That would be the king of the west, if anything, but not the king of the north. No, a Syrian king in the last stage, Daniel 8:23, following the last stage of the Syrian kingdom, where Antiochus Epiphanes was certainly a type, a Hitlerite character, a Syrian person. That's where you look for the Antichrist. Assyrian in Isaiah 10 and many other places. He then is going to come to his end in a flood of destruction.
Yeah, Anthony, we have Antoine who wants to come on because I would like him to explain that apparently the JWs don't even believe in that the Antichrist will appear in the end time. So there is no Antichrist at all.
No.
Hello, Antoine.
Hello.
Oh, sorry, Jennifer. I'm sorry. This is
Jennifer.
Antoine.
Hi, Jennifer.
How are you?
Hi.
I'm here too.
Okay.
Oh, you're both there.
You as
Where's the dog? Where's the Twinkle Toes dog?
How are y'all doing?
good.
Fine, we're doing good.
Antoine is a former JW elder and his wife. Could you explain the Antichrist thing in the organization?
Yeah, please
We
do.
don't have even a future Antichrist?
Well, they really don't even get into that topic. Most of their articles are written are about the spirit of the Antichrist that'll be around during the last days.
Yeah.
As far as a Antichrist figure that'll be appearing in Jerusalem, that's not touched on.
That's actually amazing. Thanks for that good information. He's doing 1 John 2:18 there.
Right.
John says, you've heard that Antichrist is coming. He didn't say that was wrong. Again, all the good commentators get this right. You've heard that Antichrist is coming. That's not wrong. Let me tell you something else. The spirit of Antichrist is already at work, but it's going to culminate in a final Antichrist. I mean, every commentator from time immemorial has understood this. This is not difficult. But you don't have to believe a word that I say. Check it out. And if you don't like it, you reject it. But it makes good sense of the text. Man of sin, that Jesus is going to destroy at his second coming. And that man of sin has a parousia also. It's a fake second coming. He's pretending to be Jesus maybe. And he kids a lot of people. That actually doesn't surprise me when I look at the cunning that people use these days, even now. Then imagine the cunning tricks that are going to come.
So Antoine,
thank you for that information. Good.
Antoine, you wrote that, so the organization is taught that they're waiting for what exactly?
Well, really, the steps that they say will be happening during the last days, they talk about they actually talk about the sign of peace and security, what Paul spoke about. They mention that, and then after this time, they go into Revelation about how they say that false religion will be done away with, and this is what starts the Great Tribulation.
Okay.
So as far as the Antichrist figure,
Abomination? Nothing?
that's not talked about. That's not talked about. And the words of Jesus in Matthew 24 about the abomination, that they're looking back to Jerusalem when the Roman army surrounded Jerusalem.
You know why that doesn't work.
But as far as talking about, you know, the parousia for Jesus and this Antichrist that'll come before that, that's not touched on.
So they're sort of partial preterists, I guess. Yeah.
Well, you can gently suggest that that's got to be wrong, because Jesus said that the abomination of desolation will be the sign of the impending Great Tribulation. And then he said in 24:29, immediately after that Great Tribulation, that's not hard. Immediately, without any gap, Mark says, in those days after that, I'm tempted to say that tribulation, right? Christ is coming back. Come on, folks. I know your son Devin understands this very well. Immediately after the tribulation of those days, that can't be 70 AD. Unless, are you going to say then that the Great Tribulation began in 70 AD? We're living in it right now. When we went to Olive Garden yesterday for a celebration, I don't think that was the Great Tribulation. Let's get those things out there. A little humor goes a long way, by the way. So again, do not believe a word I say. Check it out. As far as I can manage, this puts the facts together with the least difficulties, put it that way. But if you want to have a different view, by all means have it.
Yeah.
So the whole let's see, just to go back to the Olivet prophecy, Antoine.
Yeah.
So when it talks about the right, so the abomination. So when Jesus says that one of the signs is the abomination,
yep.
So be on the lookout. He's saying for this abomination. Yep. So if that's in the past, 2,000 plus years now, right, and it's connected. The whole prophecy is connected, right? There's one narrative. It's
absolutely.
So they're just sort of picking and choosing, I guess, like a preterist would.
That's exactly what happens.
Mm-hmm.
That's what happens.
Yep.
Okay.
You can choose.
I'm glad.
And it all starts with the question in Matthew 24:3 about the presence. So they turned this parousia into a presence for 1914. So everything out, down the line that Jesus said, they have to fit it back to the presence of 1914. Now everything else is out of whack.
No, it's very bad. Presence is the wrong translation. Let's talk about arrival, coming, but presence allows you to slip into an invisible presence. Then here's the worst thing, Antoine. When you say then that the resurrection, or rather the second coming, was in 1914 or 18, you've given us, I think, a choice, then you're saying the resurrection happened then. Because we all know that the resurrection of the dead happens at the same time as the parousia. That's 1 Corinthians 15:23. Put your stake in there. And anybody who says then that the second coming has already happened is implying that the resurrection has happened. And Paul names the culprits there. Philetus and Hymenaeus are putting cancer into the system, he said. This is a very serious matter, because what you believe is making you who you are. Don't put poison in your brain. You might as well put cyanide in your coffee. Don't do it.
That's right.
Anyway, I know you're working very hard to help some of your friends from the Watchtower, which is wonderful.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Oh, sorry. Thank you for that. Yeah, a lot of people watching probably are not familiar with the organization as it's known system. So one more before we go, Anthony. We hit the hour mark. I think we've done this before, but for the sake of the viewer, there's a Facebook, Candace. We know Candace. How often should we break bread, communion, weekly, monthly, etc.?
Yeah, and the answer is I think there's no fixed rule. It is not once a year. I'll tell you why. Paul says there, when he's describing it in 1 Corinthians, when you come together as a church, you're not doing the Lord's Supper properly. Some of you, heaven forbid, are actually drunk and gluttonous at the meal. It would have been a community meal at the end of which they would have broken the bread and drunk a little wine. So it's not once a year. That would make it an annual Passover, and that would be more of a Jewish calendar thing. So once a week, very possibly when they came together, I think getting a meal together, if you want to do it with a meal, you don't have to. You can do it separate. In fact, Paul said that. If you're going to be drunk or hungry, then stay at home and eat. Don't come and gorge yourself at this community meal. So it's not possible always to do it with a community meal. It's just too much work. We happen to do it once a month. There's nothing sacrosanct about that. You want to do every 2 months. I would make no rules at all about that, but certainly not once a year. If you do it too often, one might become over familiar with it. I don't know. Work it out. Other point, Carlos, is that he says, I'm coming to see you within the year. I'm coming to see you. I'll settle the other questions when I come. But that was an urgent enough issue, the abuse of the Lord's Supper, that he had to deal with it right on at that moment. That proves then it wasn't going to be a year before they got round to it. So again, commentary gets this basically right. Not a problem. Use a little wine and break bread. You don't have to do the unleavened bread. You can if you feel that's better, but bread is bread. I think that would work. It's not just a Passover, because you're keeping the Passover all the time. Let us be keeping the feast. Let us be celebrating the feast day after day after day. That's also in the same book, 1 Corinthians 5:5, I think. So I hope that answers it. What I said there will be found in any decent dictionary, commentary, and so on.
Yep. Okay. Thanks everyone for watching.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Anthony. So this was Q&A, and I'll leave you with my own little question to put forth regarding this topic of preterism or historicism. Why did the apostles ask for a visible sign? What else would a sign be, right?
Yeah.
If it's not visible, so that's a good question to ask. So
Yeah.
we'll see you next time.
Good. Great. Wonderful.